how to play double stops. It's one of the techniques that for majority a lot of instruments, but especially for violin, we use a lot of double stops to add texture and character and color to our music. And it's one of the techniques that is so fascinating and makes violin so beautiful. So today is a part one. So we're going to talk about what double stops are and how to play that on your instrument. And next week in part two, we're going to talk about some common mistakes and some common troubles and how to troubleshoot them. Okay, so good. So today, let's talk about double stops and how to play them. So what are double stops? So double stops are when you play more than one note at the same time. So on the violin or on any strings instrument, on the violin, that means you're playing two strings at the same time. So for example, if I play A and E strings together, that's a double stop. D and A, G and D. Right? So let's talk about how to make that sound on your violin. So first thing we have to understand is in order for us to have beautiful sound, we need to have evenness in our tone. So meaning we have to touch both strings at the same time evenly, like this. Now, what would uneven sound like? It would sound something like this. See how it's not even, and you're not getting the beautiful ringing sound when your bow is touching both strings at the same time. So it's very important that in order to get beautiful sound, we have to have evenness in our tone. So it needs to be even. So let's see how we can do that in our violin. So the best way to think about this is if you were to have an invisible string. You have a string that you can't see between the two strings that you want to play. So let's take A and E string for example. So if you were to have an invisible string between A string and E string, imagine there's an invisible string, and put your bow on that invisible string. So when you do that, you'll notice that your bow is touching both strings at the same time. Touching both strings at the same time, and the weight is evenly distributed between two strings, and then play. So imagine there's an invisible string between the two strings that you want to play. Put the bow on that invisible string and pull. Let's do the same thing on D and A. So between the D and A, invisible string, put the bow down and play. There we go. So now let's think about how we can do that in our practice. So number one thing that is not helping the players or the students or adult musicians not be able to have beautiful tone and beautiful double stops is actually not doing it. So let me explain. So if you went to school, and especially if you went to school somewhere in North America, United States, or Canada, so I'm from U.S., so I'm just gonna talk about the U.S. school system. When you're in school, your teacher probably at some point have asked you to put something in your own words. You learn a concept, and the teacher asks you to put that or explain it in your own words. So now, how would you go about doing or putting it or explaining the concept in your own words? You do that by doing it. You don't do that by knowing how to explain it in your own words or why you are explaining it in your own words. In order to explain a concept in your own words, you have to explain it in your own words by putting together words that you know in a way that makes sense multiple times. So playing the violin is the same thing. The only one way that we can get beautiful double stops in our violin is not knowing how to play beautiful double stops or why we should play double stops. It's by playing double stops. So implementation and taking action is the number one most important thing. So that being said, if you have your violin with you, and if you're watching replay or if you're live, get your violin out, and we're gonna do it together. So action is the most important thing. So let's stick to our open strings. Let's do D and A. So look at your D and A string. Imagine there's an invisible line or invisible string between your D and A. Put the bow on that invisible string. And notice your bow hair is touching both strings at the same time, evenly. And play. Let's do it again. A and E. Now let's add in the left hand. So what we're just going to do is to keep it pretty simple. Let's play our E string. E, F sharp, G, A, like this. Again. Now we're going to do the same thing, but instead of just playing the E string, we're going to play the invisible string between your A and E string. So find it first. We're going to play E, F sharp, G, A. Ready? Go. Let's do it again. Now we're going to move on to the A string. So move your fingers onto the A string. This time we're going to do A, B, C sharp, D. Let's play together. A, B, C sharp, D. And instead of playing just A string, we're going to put our bow on that invisible string. Notice that I'm using my elbow and making sure I'm adjusting the angle of my right arm to touch both strings at the same time. Now let's play. Let's do it again. Okay, so if you've tried it on your own, it might have sounded something like this. Or something like this. Which is different than right? So when you play double stop, and especially if you're just in the learning stage, you're going to encounter a lot of problems, and it's going to sound not so beautiful, and you might be wondering, oh, like why is this happening, right? Why is this happening? This is not clean. Like this is not as beautiful. Like, is it my right arm? Is it my intonation? Is it my fingers, etc., etc. So we're gonna talk about that next week. Troubleshooting when your vibrato, when your double stops are not as ringing and beautiful as you would like. We're gonna go through some common mistakes and common causes of that happening, and we're gonna troubleshoot them. But that's next week. But this week, I want you to remember, this is just like explaining a concept in your own words. We can't explain a concept in our own words by knowing how to explain it, by knowing why we should explain it. We can only explain the concept in our own words by explaining. So this week, I want you to take your violin and grab a spot in your pieces that you're working on, or just do what we just did. Just 1, 2, 3. Make sure you're touching both strings at the same time evenly, and practice just that. And let me know how that goes, and I would love to see you next week with our troubleshooting for double stops. So thank you so much for joining, everybody, and I'll see you next week.